Football is more than a game. It is passion. It is politics. It is poetry. It has shaped nations, ended wars, and created icons. Across every continent, from the golden sands of Africa to the bitter snowfields of the Soviet East, the game has always been more than just a ball and a net. In 1989, that truth would be burned into history. This is the story of young men who came to a desert with little more than belief and rewrote the rules of destiny. This is the story of one match, 90 minutes, that changed the way the world saw African football. This is the miracle of Dammam. It begins with two teams, one feared, one forgotten. Chapter 1: Nigeria, a nation of dreamers. By the late 1980s, Nigeria was a nation in flux, politically uncertain, economically challenged, but on the football pitch, hope still bloomed. The Super Eagles were known across Africa, but the world hadn't yet taken the country seriously. What they lacked in funding, they made up for in fire. In raw, uncut, street-hardened talent, the Flying Eagles, Nigeria's U20 national team, had already shown flashes of brilliance. Players like NDuka Ugbade, Oladimeji Lawal, and Christopher Ohenhen were local legends, young, hungry, and fearless. But there was always one thing missing: international respect. That's what the 1989 FIFA World Youth Championship in Saudi Arabia was about. It was more than a tournament. It was a mission, a statement, a chance to prove that African footballers could compete not just with flair, but with results. These were boys who trained on bare soil, who sprinted on gravel, who shared one ball among 30 kids in the heat of the Lagos sun. They were not coddled. They were carved. When the team boarded the plane to Saudi Arabia, they were hopeful, but realistic. No African team had ever gone past the quarterfinals of the U20 World Cup. Nigeria's draw had not been kind. After topping their group, they were drawn against one of the most terrifying sides in world football history, the USSR. Chapter 2: The Soviets. Steel and Strategy. The Soviet Union was everything Nigeria wasn't. They had structure, they had science, they had a national sports system that groomed athletes from age 6. Their football was disciplined, tactical, and ruthless. In 1989, the Soviet U20 team was stacked with future stars, players like Oleg Salenko, who would later score 5 goals in a single World Cup match, and Sergei Kiryakov, a lethal striker with ice in his veins. They didn't just want to win, they expected to. To the Soviets, Nigeria was just another third world obstacle. Fast? Maybe. Entertaining? Sure, but tactically inferior, mentally weak. That was the assumption, and it nearly became truth. Chapter 3: A Desert Night. February 25, 1989. Prince Mohammed bin Fahd Stadium, Dammam. It was 26 degrees Celsius. The stadium wasn't full, but buzzing. Locals had come to witness what they assumed would be a comfortable Soviet victory. Nigeria wore green, the Soviets white and red. The referee, Austria's Hubert Forstinger, blew the whistle, and the nightmare began. Nigeria tried to press early, they played bravely, but it was a trap. The USSR's passing triangles were crisp, their movement without the ball relentless. It wasn't long before Nigeria's defense started breaking apart. At the 30th minute, it began. Sergei Kiryakov received a through ball from midfield and calmly slotted it past the Nigerian keeper. 1-0. 8 minutes later, same man. This time from the edge of the box, a precise strike, 2-0. Right before halftime, Bakva Tadiv picked up a loose ball and buried a third. Nigerian defenders looked helpless. Their coach, Tunda Disu, stared silently from the sidelines. Fans watching from Lagos to Kaduna shook their heads. "They're out of their depth," some said. "This is embarrassing," others muttered. Then came the fourth goal, barely 60 seconds into the second half. Oleg Salenko, with a striker's instinct, capitalized on a defensive error and made it 4-0. Silence. The scoreboard mocked them, 4-0, against the Soviet Union, in a World Cup quarterfinal, on foreign soil. Commentators began drafting their obituaries. The Nigerian media prepared their headlines: humiliated, exposed, outclassed. Some of the fans in the stadium got up to leave. Some players were already hanging their heads. It felt over. But in that moment, in that silence, something shifted. Coach Disu called his boys together. What he told them was never recorded. But years later, NDuka Ugbade recalled his words. "We are not done. We are not defeated. You must give your blood. Play like your country is watching." Because they are, and so began the greatest comeback in football history. Chapter 4. The fight begins. The second half had barely resumed when the fourth Soviet goal went in. 46 minutes, 4-0. Even the neutral crowd in Dammam began to relax. The match looked sealed, but Nigeria didn't lie down. The Flying Eagles began to play like wounded animals. Fast, sharp, free from fear. It was no longer about winning. It was about pride, about restoring their name. In the 61st minute, it started. Oladimeji Lawal, one of Nigeria's most electric midfielders, received a short pass near the edge of the box. He controlled it with one touch, skipped past a defender with the second, and then, boom! He struck with venom. The ball tore into the net, unstoppable. 4-1. At first, the crowd didn't even react. It felt like a consolation goal. But to the Nigerian bench, to the players on the field, to every fan watching from Africa to Europe, something had shifted. The Soviets were rattled, not panicked, but suddenly less certain. And Nigeria? They smelled blood. They pressed higher, ran harder. Their passes became crisper, more daring. Every tackle was thunder. Every touch a statement. 15 minutes later, the second goal arrived. In the 75th minute, Christopher Ohenhen, strong, poised, relentless, found space in the box. A looping cross came from the right. He timed his leap perfectly, rising above his marker. His header was fierce and precise. The net rippled. The goalkeeper had no chance. 4-2. The stadium buzzed. The Nigerians sprinted to the corner flag. Ohenhen screamed into the sky. The camera panned to Soviet coach Gennady Kostelev, now pacing nervously on the touchline. Something was wrong. His players could feel it. From the Soviet side, passes started going astray. Their previously clockwork rhythm turned jittery. Players looked over their shoulders more often. Some began arguing. From the Nigerian side, belief exploded. By now, Coach Disu had turned conductor, barking tactical orders, encouraging calm, yet feeding the momentum. The bench was on their feet. The substitutes were shouting louder than the fans. Every clearance, every interception, a war cry. In the 83rd minute, the third goal. Samuel Elijah, a player known for his work rate more than flair, received the ball just outside the penalty area. It wasn't a clean setup. It wasn't a scripted play. It was instinct. One touch to his right. A quick look. A cannon of a shot. The ball flew, low and fast, squeezing through defenders and past the outstretched fingers of the Soviet keeper. 4-3. Now it was chaos. The Nigerian fans in the stadium, few in number, but loud in spirit, erupted. The noise was deafening. Even the neutrals in the crowd began to rally behind the underdogs. From the sideline, Soviet assistant coaches were screaming. The players couldn't hear them. Their lead had collapsed. Their confidence was cracking. And then came the moment. The one that turned a match into a miracle. Chapter 5. NDuka's Destiny. Just 60 seconds after Elijah's goal, the Soviets kicked off and immediately lost the ball. Nigeria surged forward again. The pressure was relentless. It was no longer about skill, it was about will. A miscue in the Soviet backline, a failed clearance. The ball bounced awkwardly inside the box, and standing there was the captain, NDuka Ugbade, a leader not by speech, but by presence. The youngest member of Nigeria's 1985 U17 World Cup winning team, a boy who'd already tasted global victory, and now the heart of a team fighting for survival. The ball landed at his feet. He didn't hesitate. One step, one strike. Goal. The net bulged. The stadium went silent, and then erupted. In the 84th minute, NDuka Ugbad had equalized. Nigeria had come back from 4 goals down. They sprinted to the bench. Players were in tears. Ugbad pointed to the sky, overwhelmed. Fans hugged strangers. Journalists dropped their pens. Commentators yelled, "It's 4-4. I cannot believe what I'm seeing." Back in Nigeria, radios exploded with sound. Living rooms turned into stadiums. Streets erupted into chaos. In Lagos, people stopped traffic to celebrate. It was more than a goal. It was a revolution. But the match wasn't over yet. Chapter 6, The Final Minutes. With 6 minutes left in regulation time, both teams were suddenly locked in a psychological war. The Soviets, once giants, were now afraid. They had gone from conquerors to survivors. Every Nigerian attack brought panic. Every set piece made their keeper scream instructions. Nigeria, riding the wave, looked like a different team entirely. Confident, crisp, composed. In the final moments, Nigeria came close to scoring a 5th. A blistering counterattack nearly ended in glory, but the final shot went just wide. The whistle blew. Full time, 4-4. No extra time. The match would be decided on penalties. The game had already become historic, but the story was not yet complete. Chapter 7, Penalties and Pressure. The air in the stadium was heavy. Even the sand in the distance seemed to pause. Everyone, players, fans, coaches, knew this wasn't just a football match anymore. This was legend in the making. Nigeria had clawed back from the dead. But the Soviet Union was still standing. And football, in its cruelest form, would now ask these boys, barely adults, to hold their nerve from 12 yards out. Penalty shootouts are brutal. They reduce football's complexity into a psychological war. One kick, one moment, one miss, and it's over. The players gathered in the center circle. Some prayed, others stared blankly. A few couldn't stop trembling. Coach Disu gave no long speech, just a nod. "Be brave," he said. "You've already made history. Now finish it." The Soviets were first to kick. Goal, calm and clinical. Nigeria responded immediately, 1-1. Second kick, USSR. Another clean finish, 2-1. Then came Ohenhen for Nigeria, the man who had sparked the comeback. He stepped up, eyes locked, and blasted the ball into the top corner. 2-2. The third Soviet kick, a deep breath, a run-up, a shot, miss. The ball flew wide, gasps echoed through the stands. Soviet players held their heads. Their coach screamed in disbelief. Nigeria had the advantage. Lawal stepped up for the third Nigerian kick, focused, poised. He struck it low and hard. 3-2 Nigeria. The fourth Soviet taker tried to regain composure. He scored, 3-3. Now it was Ugbad's turn, the captain, the man who had carried this team emotionally. He walked up slowly, nodded to the referee, and stood still for a full 5 seconds. Then, one fluid motion. Strike, goal, 4-3. One more kick each. The final Soviet kicker approached. If he missed, Nigeria would win. The stadium held its breath. He kicked. Saved! The Nigerian keeper dove left, his hand outstretched like destiny itself, pushing the ball away. It was over. Nigeria had done it. 5-3 on penalties, from 4-0 down to victory, from the depths of despair to the heights of hope. The greatest comeback in FIFA history was complete. Chapter 8, Collapse and Celebration. What followed was pure chaos. Players fell to their knees. crying, shouting, laughing, collapsing from exhaustion and disbelief. Some rolled on the ground, others sprinted to hug their coaches. The few Nigerian fans in the stands danced in the aisles, waving green and white flags with tears in their eyes. On the Soviet side, silence. The players looked stunned, as if they had woken from a nightmare. Some refused to speak, others buried their faces in their shirts. Coach Kostylev stood frozen, his hands on his hips. For him, it was unthinkable. A match they had won, controlled and dominated. Lost, not in tactics, but in spirit. Across the world, the media exploded. Headlines screamed, "From tragedy to triumph. Dammam delivers a miracle. Nigeria makes history." In Lagos, millions poured into the streets. Radios played commentary on loop. Churches held prayer services, not of grief, but of gratitude. It wasn't just a football match. It was a national moment. Chapter 9. The world takes notice. For years, African nations had battled prejudice in international football. European pundits often dismissed them as athletic, but tactically naive. That day changed everything. The miracle of Dammam was a turning point, not just for Nigeria, but for the entire continent. FIFA officials called it the greatest youth match of all time. Coaches from South America and Europe started taking note of African talent. Scouts from European clubs, once reluctant, now came in droves. Nigerian players were no longer hidden gems. They were golden prospects. And for the Flying Eagles, this match cemented their legacy forever. Chapter 10. After the Whistle. The dust had barely settled on the stadium in Dammam, but the shockwaves were already moving across continents. Nigeria had advanced to the semifinals, but in truth, they had already won something much bigger. They had forced the world to rethink everything. FIFA, often slow to praise African teams, issued a rare statement. This was not just a great comeback. It was one of the greatest matches in the history of international youth football commentators across Europe, who once mocked African football as unstructured, now found themselves replaying every Nigerian goal in awe. Newspapers from London to Buenos Aires carried the same image. NDuka Ugbade, arms outstretched, eyes to the sky, in tears after the equalizer. This wasn't just football, it was spiritual. Chapter 11. The semi-final loss, and why it didn't matter. Despite the euphoria, the tournament wasn't over. In the semi-finals, Nigeria faced the United States. It was a tight match, emotionally draining and physically exhausting. The Flying Eagles had spent every last drop of energy against the USSR. They lost that semi-final narrowly, and then lost again in the third-place playoff. On paper, they finished fourth. But in football folklore, they had already become immortal. Ask anyone who watched that tournament in 1989, and no one talks about the final. No one remembers the champion. They remember Nigeria 4, USSR 4. They remember the miracle. Chapter 12. What happened to the heroes? Where did they go? What happened after the miracle? Let's start with the captain. NDuka Ugbade, the man who equalized in the 84th minute, would go on to become a household name in Nigeria. He played professionally in Europe and later became a coach, eventually managing Nigeria's U17 and U20 teams. To this day, he is remembered not just for his talent, but for his leadership, calm, and courage. Oladimeji Lawal, who scored the first goal to spark the comeback, also had a strong professional career, playing in Belgium and Tunisia. Known for his work rate and shooting power, he became a model of midfield consistency for future Nigerian generations. Christopher Ohenhen, the man who scored the second goal, went on to play club football in Spain and was widely respected for his aerial dominance. He was one of the early Nigerians to break into the La Liga system, blazing a trail for others. Samuel Elijah, the scorer of the third goal, continued to play in Africa and Asia. His name is still chanted in Nigerian football academies. Not because he became a global star, but because he showed that heart can rewrite history. And what of the keeper who saved that final penalty, His name was Aloy Agu. He would become Nigeria's first-choice goalkeeper in the early 1990s and later serve as a goalkeeper coach for the Super Eagles. Their careers varied. Some reached higher, others faded into football's quiet corners. But together, they shared a moment of immortality. Chapter 13: The Soviets. The other side history tends to forget the losers, but they have their story too. Oleg Salenko, scorer of the USSR's fourth goal, would later etch his name into World Cup history by scoring 5 goals in a single match at the 1994 tournament in the United States, a record that still stands. Sergei Kiryakov, who scored the opening brace in that 1989 match, went on to play for the senior Soviet and Russian national teams. He built a respectable career in the Bundesliga and later became a manager. But for many of the Soviet players, that night in Dammam would forever be a scar. They had the match, and they lost it, not on skill, but on will. Years later, when asked about the game, a former Soviet assistant coach said, "We were not beaten by football, we were beaten by belief." In the days after Dammam, every African football nation saw themselves in the Flying Eagles. If Nigeria could rise from 4-0 down to defeat a superpower, then what else was possible? What else had been made to feel impossible simply because of where you came from? Coaches across the continent began to rethink tactics. Youth programs expanded. Investment into grassroots football increased, not just in Nigeria, but in Ghana, Senegal, Cameroon, South Africa. The idea that Africa could one day win the Senior World Cup was no longer a dream. It was a goal. FIFA took note. For the first time, real conversations began around hosting youth tournaments in Africa. European clubs began signing young African players at an unprecedented rate. In a way, Dammam was the earthquake that shook the talent tree, and the world began to harvest its fruit. And for the players who came after, the match became myth. Chapter 15: The Golden Generation. 5 years later, Nigeria would qualify for their first senior FIFA World Cup. In 1994, they stunned the world again, topping their group ahead of Bulgaria and Argentina and narrowly losing to Italy in the round of 16 after leading for most of the match. Many of the players on that 1994 squad grew up idolizing the Flying Eagles of 1989. Some, like Emmanuel Amunike and Daniel Amokachi, were already in the youth system at the time of the miracle of Dammam. 2 years after that, at the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, Nigeria did what no African nation had ever done. They won Olympic gold in football, beating Brazil, then Argentina. That moment was built on the back of 1989. Dammam gave Nigeria, and all of Africa, the audacity to believe that the global football order could be disrupted. That belief, that confidence, was passed on like a torch. Chapter 16. The story lives on more than 3 decades later. The miracle of Dammam is still spoken of in reverent tones. In Nigerian schools, football academies replay that match during training camps, not just as a tactical lesson, but as a spiritual one. A lesson in grit, in heart, in mental resilience. Books have been written, documentaries produced. Sports networks still rank it among the top 5 comebacks in football history. Not because of what was at stake, it was just a youth quarterfinal after all, but because of how it unfolded, because of what it represented, because of the raw, undiluted joy of sport overcoming logic. Chapter 17. A final whistle, a first page. The miracle of Dammam wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning. It wasn't just about beating the Soviet Union. It was about what the match symbolized, that no matter how dominant the opponent, no matter how bleak the scoreboard, no matter how late the hour, you are never done. It was about redemption, about rewriting fate in real time. In life, and in football, so many people are told they're too small, too late, too poor, too weak. Nigeria that day said, "We don't care what we're told. We'll decide when the game is over." And that is why it became a miracle. Epilogue, the voice of the game. They say football is a game of two halves, but sometimes in just one half, in just 30 minutes, in one desert stadium, you can witness the full glory of the human spirit. Nigeria 4-4 USSR. Nigeria wins 5-3 on penalties. February 25, 1989. Dammam, Saudi Arabia. Not just a date in football history, but a chapter in humanity's endless capacity to believe. Never count out the dreamers, never count out the underdogs, and never, ever turn off the game before the final whistle, because you just might miss a miracle.
Number 2 scored for Soviet Union. 6-6. Next for Nigeria, Mike for Uchamara. Go! The keeper nearly caught it. Mike for Uchamara. He nearly caught it, but the god of soccer says with the flying eagles. Nigeria 7, Soviet Union 6. Kasimov to take the Soviet third one. It is saved! It is saved! And then Kamadi saved it. And then Kamadi saved it. He took the slow motion. And Kamadi stretched full length to save that one. And giving Nigeria an advantage in this penalty shootout. Nigeria leading 7-6. 2 more to go for Nigeria and 2 more to go for the Soviets. Mutiu Adepoju.